Today I'm going to talk to you about Armed Forces Day and briefly describe the duties of the 6 branches of our military. Armed Forces Day is celebrated on the third Saturday in May as a way to thank our active duty military members for their service to our country. Armed Forces Day was designed to honor our military by expanding public understanding of military jobs and the role of the military. Celebrations may include parades, military displays, demonstrations of state-of-the-art equipment, open houses, fundraising events that benefit our troops, and public educational activities. Armed Forces Day replaced separate celebrations for the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force when the armed forces were unified under the Department of Defense in 1949. Armed Forces Day was not a holiday I had heard much about, and I wondered how it differed from other military holidays. Armed Forces Day honors all active duty military members, whether they are serving during a war or peacetime. It differs from Veterans Day, which honors all those who have previously served honorably in the military, and Memorial Day, which honors those who died in military service to their country. Memorial Day was formerly known as Decoration Day, and was originally a day to clean up and decorate the graves of Civil War soldiers. In his 1963 proclamation of Armed Forces Day, President John F. Kennedy said, "Our servicemen and women are serving throughout the world as guardians of peace, many of them away from their homes, their friends, and their families. They are visible evidence of our determination to meet any threat to the peace with measured strength and high resolve. They are also evidence of a harsh but inescapable truth that the survival of freedom requires great cost and commitment and great personal sacrifice." Our armed forces have been protecting America's interests for nearly 250 years, dating back to 1775, when the Continental Congress established the Army, Navy, and Marines to fight the British during the American Revolutionary War. The troops were commanded by General George Washington and were successful in officially gaining our independence on September 7, 1783, when the Treaty of Paris ended the war. Since it was formed, the primary responsibility of the Army has been to fight battles on land. It was only 2 years after our new nation won its independence that the U.S. Army fought its first war, the Northwest Indian War of 1785 to 1795. As part of the Treaty of Paris, Britain ceded control of the Northwest Territory, which was the home of Native American cultures and some French settlers. After the Revolution, settlers began moving west of the Appalachians into territory that eventually became the northeastern part of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. This led to conflicts with the Native Americans who were already living there, and eventually a war against a coalition of Native American tribes who were aided by Great Britain. The war lasted 10 years and pushed Native Americans further west. Also established in 1775 was a fragmented Continental Navy assisted by privateers. Ships occasionally transported troops and helped defend port cities, but the Navy's main function was to capture enemy ships and their badly needed supplies. The father of the U.S. Navy was a Scotsman named John Paul Jones, who joined the colonists during the American Revolution. Jones attacked British ships off the American coastline and captured British vessels and cargo. In 1779, after being put in command of a converted merchant ship on loan from King Louis XVI of France, he set sail for the North Sea to raid British merchant ships. Jones's warship, the Bonhomme Richard, met up with Britain's powerful warship HMS Serapis near the North Sea. After a 4-hour gun battle that killed nearly half of the sailors on both sides, the British asked if Jones would surrender. This is where he delivered his famous response, "I have not yet begun to fight." The British eventually surrendered, but the Bonhomme Richard suffered catastrophic damage and sank 11 hours later. After the American Revolution ended, the U.S. sold their ships and dissolved the Navy due to lack of funds. It wasn't until President Washington signed the Naval Act of 1794 that the Navy was reestablished. 6 frigates were commissioned to protect U.S. merchant shipping vessels and commerce from attack from foreign countries and from pirates. 2 battalions of Continental Marines were formed in November 1775 in Philadelphia as infantry troops capable of fighting on both land and sea. Part of the U.S. Department of the Navy since 1834, Marines have their own infantry, armor, artillery, aerial, and special operations forces. They operate on the ground and aboard amphibious warships that land and support ground forces. The Marines have tactical aviation squadrons embedded in Navy carrier air wings and operate from the aircraft carriers, which are a seagoing airbase. The Coast Guard was founded in 1790 as Revenue Marine to collect customs duties at U.S. ports, and it became the U.S. Coast Guard in 1915 under the Department of the Treasury. During peacetime, it operates under the Department of Homeland Security, but during war, it can be transferred to the Navy by the President or by Congress. The Coast Guard is the oldest continuous maritime service of the U.S., and despite being the second smallest branch of the U.S. military, it is the 12th largest naval force in the world. Duties include iceberg patrol, marine environmental protection, marine safety, navigation aids, search and rescue, defense readiness, maritime security, and law enforcement, including fisheries, migrant interdiction, and drug interdiction. The United States Air Force was formed as part of the Army in 1907. It was established as a separate branch of the military with the passing of the National Security Act of 1947. Prior to 1947, responsibility for military aviation was divided between the Army for land-based operations and the Navy and Marine Corps for sea-based operations from aircraft carriers and amphibious aircraft. The first major U.S. aviation combat force was created upon the United States' entry into World War I in 1917. It was called the Air Service of the American Expeditionary Force, and later the Army Air Corps. It was during World War II that the Army Air Forces really came of age based on long-range strategic bombing. The Army Air Forces provided tactical support, airlifts of supplies, combat fighters, and bombing runs, including the atomic bomb attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki that ended World War II. The U.S. Air Force is committed to air superiority, global integrated intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, rapid global mobility, global strike, and command and control. United States Space Force is the world's first and only independent space force. It is a part of the U.S. Air Force and traces its roots back to 1945 during the Cold War. The Global Positioning System, military satellite communications and weather constellations, missile warning systems, space surveillance networks are all operated by the U.S. Space Force. The Gulf War was the first major employment of space forces where they proved critical to the U.S.-led coalition. In December 2019, the United States Space Force Act reorganized Air Force Space Command into the United States Space Force, the first new independent military service since the Air Force in 1947.
First to fight for the right and to